Everything. Oh, everything is going to be, All right, we're back, and it's COMP123. That's Programming 2, Summer 2016, Week 9, and we're at Centennial, and we've just kind of did an intro on Windows Forms. I keep saying web forms. Windows Forms. Web forms are on my mind. And what I want to do is just bring this up a little bit bigger and go through the stuff that we've already gone through on the slide. Right? Remember, there's two parts to this: Part 1 and Part 2. I do want to mention that there will not be a quiz. There will not be a quiz this Friday. There will be a lab that I will be giving you on how to generate a web form, a Windows form. I'll be okay. Windows form, Tom. That's right. And you'll be making this window form to build something, a little something to practice. That'll be worth 2% of your final grade. And then next week we'll do a quiz based on this week stuff we've done this week with forms, and a little bit of next week. We'll do that next Friday. All right. So we've talked about forms, how to create them, how to create a form in the IDE. We've kind of did that, right? Instead of us doing enter a number and enter another number, as an example, we've did a login form. We're going to do another example in a second. It tells you how to make a form here, so I'm going to skip through this. We talked about a Solution Explorer. I'm just going to keep going through this. How to rename it. We haven't talked about how to add additional forms. We'll do that in a second. There's also some other things we have in here. One thing is that you can see there's a bunch of properties that are described in the form itself. I can assign a default accept button. Okay. Remember, I talked about there is no default behavior unless you assign it. The accept button can be the accept button for the form itself, right? Now, it won't do anything, but basically it sets the button, the form that is clicked when the user presses the enter key. So if I press the enter key, there is no default action unless, as an example, I set the accept button to an actual existing button. Let's do that. So we're going to go over here, and I'm going to go back to the design side. I'm going to click on the button, and then I'm going to go to my properties like this. And you can see that the form itself, here's the form, right? If I click on the form, and if I go to the top where it says accept button, I can align which button is there. I only have one, and I can pull down login button because I've already made the login button. I can pull that. So that means when I click enter, when the form is running, it'll run the login button. All right? Here's something. What if, just saying, I try to log in when these two things are empty, right? I need to validate what I'm getting, right? Like my username and password can't be empty when I log in. So how do I detect if my form is empty? Remember, there's strings, right? How do I check that? We're gonna talk about this in a second, right? And the other thing is, how can I check to see that the minimum length of my values entered is, let's say, 2 characters. So 2 characters for my username. So I could have maybe some username is more complex. Maybe I want to make at least 6 characters for my username, and maybe at least 10 characters for my password with some complexity involved. I can do that kind of stuff. And how do I check those things? I can check them. Is this someone cleaning the windows or something? All right. I can check them. It's just by chance. We have to have people cleaning when we're doing this. We can check this by when I click the login button. If these values are empty, I can pop up a message somewhere that says, "Hey, something's wrong," right? Let's take a look at some tools that we can possibly use. Well, you can see that there's a lot of tools here, right? I have containers, right? I have other things. Let's go over the tools. I have my pointer tool, which actually just gives me back my pointer. I can click on my button, and if I click my button and drag it over, I can drop a button. But if I don't want my button, I just click on my pointer, and it clears that selection, right? My checklist box, my date time picker, label. We've done a bunch of these already. Picture box, if I want to add an image. A rich text box, if I want to put something in there. There's a web browser that I can embed if I really want to. Bad idea. But I'm saying, just from a design perspective, if you really want to, you could. So if you want a built-in web browser. There's also other containers. Let's look at the containers you can put in. For example, a flow layout panel. A layout panel. That's different. You got to be careful with this one. And that might not be this. By the way, my selection might be different than yours if you're using Visual Studio 2013. I'm using Visual Studio 2015. And so this is my selection. Tab control, split container, panels, all kinds of other containers we're going to talk about later on. Table layouts, right? Menus and toolbars. There's some menus you can actually add into your form too. We'll talk about those. Also data, if I want to drag and drop something to do with a data control. These are data controls. So let's say if I have a database somewhere, or an Excel file, or Access database, something like that, and I want to bind them to the form to give me some dynamic data, I can do that. Other components, for example, background worker, different things we can talk here. Image lists. And say no. Keep going. If I want to print, I can do a print dialog. You know, all the other kind of stuff. I mean, how often we print these days? Hardly at all, but we have that. Different dialogues that I can create, like a color dialog, a font dialog, different things here that I want to add in. Any kind of reporting I can put in there, and other things. And there's also another area that's general that you can make your own controls if you really want to, and drag them under here. So I want to make my own, you know, kind of user control. I can make my own control and drag it in here. So I got lots of controls that I can select. And if they're not in, if you can't find them here, you can always look at all Windows Forms controls. These are all of them, and then you can use the search box to find what you're looking for, right? For example, let's say I want to look at something like what we found before, like a text box. I can look at, just type in text, and I can see that there's a bunch of options here that I have. Text box will come up, right? So I can find that really quickly, a text box. Or if I want to find a button, I can just type button, and you see there's a couple buttons that come up, a radio button, as well as a regular button, right? And maybe some kind of label, different kinds of labels here that I want, or some other kind of control like a data. If I put data grid view, data set, those kind of things I can add those in as well. So if you want to find your toolbox, this is where you kind of do all that funky stuff, right? But notice there is no validation type control that I can put in here. I want to be able to validate what's happening. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Undo. I want to validate what's going on here with my controls to make sure that this has a minimum length. Okay. Let's click on the text box, and just for now, I'm just going to unclick or unselect my Team Explorer and my Solution Explorer. So I get rid of all that stuff, so it kind of hides, and so I can see a bigger area of my properties. You can see more properties here. It's important to kind of look at all these. So let's take a look and see what you think I could use. So accepts tab, false. Okay, it doesn't accept the tab. Accepts description. Allow drop. This is if I want to do drag and drop. I can use the drag and drop controls. If I want to drag a value in here, I can do that. Anchor, top left. I can change this to whatever anchor I want. So I can align my anchors. Remember we talked about this? My anchor doesn't have to be top left. Anchor is where the origin of my text box gets rendered, right? So my top left corner is where is the 0, 0 point of my text box, right? In the global coordinate system of the form. All right. Autocomplete custom source. I could put that in there for username, but that doesn't make any sense that I want autocomplete to work, right? But if I had one, like let's say for example, I want autocomplete. If I had, we'll make another form after this that has to do with entering your address or your profile. You can add your profile in there, not just your username and password. Well, let's say I want to do a complete profile. So what's your name, you know, your phone number, all that kind of stuff. They're really doing it. You know, we can do that later on. Here's my back color for my actual window, right? No, sorry for my text box, and it says window as my default. There's two things I can do here. I can just click on this little box here, right? And what it'll do is if I click this one, I can pick a kind of a default color that exists in my system. I could click web colors. These are web compatible colors, or a custom color right here. These are the things I could pick. So that's kind of cool. So I can pick any color I want for the background, right? Right now I'm just leave it as is. I can change my border style for my label, for my text box. So right now it's fixed 3D, but I can always make it fixed single. Let's see what that looks like. So that looks a little different than fixed 3D, right? And I can always go and change my my border style. If I go back to my object, I meant to do this. Here's my border style, fixed single, right? And if I go back to none, I can take my border away. So here's no border, right? And if I go back again to this one and click border style, fixed 3D, gives me a different look and feel. By the way, this is the way it'll look and feel on my machine because I'm using Windows 10. If you're using Windows 8, it'll look different. If you're using Windows 7, look different again, right? It's going to be based on, like I said before, the culture of the machine that you're using, right? My version, Windows 10, has my fixed single and my 3D border looking the same because that's my style for Windows 10. It's compatible with Windows 10, right? Okay, foreground color is the color of the text inside of my control. You know, those kind of things. A help button, I can actually assign a help button to it. My icon, if I want to assign an icon to the form, right? Let's see what else we can get here. See for my actual text box. Lines, location, margin, maximum size, maximum length, minimum size. Some modifiers. Right now it's private, right? My password character, we already saw that one. Here's one, read only. I want you to be able to read. We can use the text box as a label. So I can create a text box and I can put stuff in there, but you can't touch it, right? You can't actually change anything in there. It's just read only, right? I can choose right to left support for those languages that require that. I can add scroll bars. I can change the tab index. I can text align the actual object here. And I can also make the visibility true or false. If I make the visibility false, the object will appear on my designer, but will not physically appear when I run my my form. It'll just be hidden and invisible. This is good if you want things to pop up when you fill out a section. You don't want to let the user fill out the other section until they've filled out one part of the section or signed off on something, like click a checkbox, and then the other part of the section will kind of come up, right, in the form. All right, so again, all these things, but I don't see anything in here that says, hey, we want to validate, right? We want to validate anything that's happening, except for causes validation. Causes validation is true by default, right? Notice that is true, right? But it doesn't. There's nothing built into the properties here that'll stop me from entering anything. It doesn't do that right now. Also, one more thing to notice about any control you put on the form, there is a little arrow here. Check out the arrow right here. Notice that it says every control like this has a little extra property you can check if you need to, like multi-line. If I wanted to make a text area, I could choose multi-line, and now my text box would be a text area, right? I don't want to do that. I don't have one of those for my username, and I don't have anything for my, sorry? Where? Did I miss it? Maximum size. Maximum length. Yeah, but maximum length specifies the maximum number of characters that can be entered into the edit control, right? So I could specify maximum length, but what about minimum length? I want a minimum length of 2, let's say, or 6, or whatever. How do I verify that? How do I check that? So when I enter my characters, so this is the behavior. So listen to my behavior now. When I enter the wrong number of characters before I print the login button, I want it to happen, right? And when I move off of that control, I move away from that control, I leave the control, right? Then I want to check to see if my minimum length is correct. How do I do that, right? It's an event handler, right? It's an event because I'm basically listening for a specific action to happen, right? So when I leave my username control, I want a minimum length. I don't care what's in there, but I want a minimum length of 6 characters for my username, right? So let's add that control. Let's see if we can figure it out. All right. So I'm going to double click on my text box to generate the event, right? And what does it say? It says username text box text changed. Well, my text is changed in the text box. Is that the right event? Because text change means when I click onto there and I actually move something in there, it's going to fire this event. Let's check this out by doing a debug.writeLine. Debug.writeLine, and we'll say text changed. So to check out what it does, right? It's important for us to kind of understand, right, what it's doing. And let's run the thing, and then let's just click in there and see what happens, right? Because there's different kinds of events you can zero in on. You don't have to accept. Hey, don't hit her, man. Don't hit her, man. Hitting people. All right. We know what I'm telling you, right? She'll hit back, right? All right. So let's take a look here. I've got here's my output window, and I've just pulled my username to the side. I'm going to start typing. Look, my text is changing every time I type a letter. That's not what I want. That's going to generate my event every single letter. That's not right, right? So that's not the right event. Let's stop that off. So how do I get rid of an event? Be very careful. Be very, very careful, right? Please do not, whatever you do, delete this event from here, all right? Here's what we want to do, all right? So I want to save this form. I just deleted the content here, okay? But I'm going to go back to my login form, and I'm going to go back into my Solution Explorer. Or actually, I'll go into my properties. It's just easier. And I'm going to pin my properties up. I'm also going to click on the control itself. Now, notice that there's a little lightning bolt up here. Ooh, take this. Look at this lightning bolt up here. That's events. These are all the events that I can do. And right now, I have an event called username text box change. Here's what I want you to do. Wipe it out down here. Just undo this. Just actually down here inside the event, just kill it. So there's nothing inside that text changed event down here. All right? Yeah, actually, I can. It's really weird. It's showing me like I got mouse. It's following my things. You're right, Joanne. Something's right. Something's happening here. I know it's not working. So I've killed it down here, right? And when I go back to my login form, notice that it's gone. That's the way you kill an event. Please do not do it from code first. If you do it from the code first, it will kill your form. Your form will not function anymore. Huh? It already happened to you? Yes, yes. Well, that's why I'm telling you not to do it, right? Please don't do that. Okay. So this is what you want. So let's go look at the events. I can do a bunch of different kinds of events. Accept tab changed, back color changed. So anytime of these are causes validation changed, border style changed, right? Let me see what else we have here. What I want to do is I want to when I physically move out of it, if I tab away from it, right? So here's one, a leave event, right? But what does it do? It says occurs when the control is no longer the active control of the form. So this is the one I want. So when I leave that control, because I start off there, I want to make sure that the username is at least X number of characters, right? 6 characters or whatever, right? So let's double click this event like this. Just double click the event itself. Now what this does is it generates a username text box leave event. So when I leave the control, this is when the event will trigger. All right? Okay, so cool. So what do I want to do? If I leave the control, right? Okay. I want to check when I've left the control, right? I got to do 2 things. How many characters does the control have? So how do I do that? So if statement, right? The username text box, and now let's look at all the other things you can do here. I got my click, my contains, my controls, my created, you know, my focused, if it's focused or not. How about other things here? We got hide selection, IME, lowered, leave, left, you know, those kind of things. Margin, oh, minimum, maximum length. These are all properties of the actual control, right? But what if I want to check to see if my text can I do a length? Yeah, right? If my length, my username text box dot length, right, is less than, let's say 6, right? Can I do that? Then what do I want to say? I want to say, well, that's bad, right? I want the behavior that I want, right? I want to put the character, the user. I want to make the user select this form again. This text, get him back to that. I won't allow him to leave this thing until he enters it. All right. I mean, this is pretty draconic what I'm talking about here. Making him enter the username before he goes to the password, and if it's not proper, if it wouldn't allow him to move to the next one. I'm going to show you how much control we have. Is what I'm saying, right? You can really control the form in any way you want. So how do I focus? I want to shift the focus back to this control, my username text box control, right? How do I do that? So I say, well, tell me, do you have an idea? Username text box dot focus, right? And is it a method? It is. Remember, any kind of a verb usually is associated with a method because it's a behavior, right? So I want to set, if it's true, if it's less than 6, right, then it's going to focus back here, right? And here's the other thing. What if it's like 2 or 3? What I also want to do is I want to highlight everything that's already in there. So when the user types in his stuff again, it'll overwrite what he's got in there. It won't add to it. It will overwrite, right? So how do I do that? So username text box dot select all, right? The select all event, what it does is it selects everything. So I select everything it's already there, right? Why? Because if I only have 2 characters, it'll force me to select everything and then retype what I'm going to do. Let's try this out. So I'll save, right? So I got this leave event. That's when it's going to trigger. And I'm going to, let's save the commenting for now just to speed up a little bit. And I'm going to go here and run this thing. I'll run with debugging here for a second. So I'm going to start typing my username. So, let's say I type in Tom. Is that 6 characters? No. I tab away from it and it says, meh, it just highlights it. There's no error that's generated, right? I can't see anything, but it highlights it right away. If I take it away, or if I type whatever and I type in Thomas, right? THOMAS, 6 characters. Now if I tab, it'll allow me to go there. But anything less than that, if I go back, right? And if I type in, AB and type and tab, it won't allow me to. Even if I tab, it won't allow me to do anything. In fact, I mean, I can still log in, right? Here's the trick. All right, until my username and my password is entered, I want my login button to be disabled, right? How do I do that? So my login button is disabled, and I'm only going to enable it when my password is entered. And I can't get to my password. This is really draconic. This is really control, like bad. Like from a user perspective, it's like, God, I can't even go forward until I enter my username and password, right? I'm just saying, this is one way to do it with no other validation, right? So I want to limit this guy so that he can't, when he enters his password, and it has to be a certain length again. By the way, it's the same event. So let's stop this off. So I'll go to my password. Let's just leave that for now, right? With no other thing. So in my login form, I want to click my password, right? And I want to go back to my solution. So my solution explorer here. Sorry, my properties, and I want to click on when I click my password for my properties. And pin it, I want to go to my events, so the little lightning bolt up here, right? And I want to click the same event, the leave event, and double click. Now it's going to generate another one for my password text box leave, right? So both have leave events. I'm just going to copy this, right? And put them in here. Now you notice I'm duplicating. When I'm duplicating, what does it mean? It means I probably want a method. That's what I probably mean. Some kind of method that takes whatever my text box control is, checks it to see if it's long enough, and if it's true, it'll return true. If it's not long enough, it'll return false, and then do something with my username and text box and do the same thing. Because we're doing really the same thing over and over again, right? And I could run a method for that, a generic method, but we won't do it today, right? It takes a little bit of thinking about how to do that. All right, so for now, it's not username text box, it's password text box, right? So it's this one. I want to do my password text box, and I want to paste this in here. So password text box. And notice it gives me an error if I type the wrong one. Okay, cool. So I've done that. Now the other thing I want to do is this. I want to enable my button if it passes this test, right? If it's greater than 6, for now, that's all I'm checking for. I want to enable my button. And maybe if I really want to be draconic again, I can make my character count for my text box or my password to 10, minimum of 10 characters. And it has to be special doing it. I can use regular expressions to check to see if the pattern for my text box, my password is correct. We'll talk about that later on. But for now, I can do something like this. I can say login button dot enabled, right, is equal to true, right? It's not visible or invisible. It's enabled. But this assumes that the login button itself should be disabled by default. So I can do that on the design side. So on the design side, I click the login button, I pull up my properties, and I click on enabled, and I make the enable as false. Can I do that for my login button? Can I make enabled as false? How do I do that? Well, I gotta get away from the lightning bolt and go back to properties, right? And I go click enabled, and I make it as false. When I click enabled as false, it becomes grayed out when I run it. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So if I run, you can see that the login button is now disabled. And the only way it's going to enable is if I use the proper length for my username and password. So basic validation, like, Thomas, and then I go to here, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if I press tab, it becomes enabled. And if I press enter anywhere, it'll actually clear everything and put my my login button is the default accept button for my form. It'll log in and it'll put my username and password in there. Right? Here's the other thing I want to do. When I leave the form, when I leave this box, right? Upon leave, right? When I'm done leaving, then I want to enable the box. I enable upon leaving, right? And so far, what I'm not doing is, it's not checking until I've left the box, right? But I don't have any kind of message anywhere that tells me that I got a problem, right? So let's create, right, an ability for us to change the please login text. This is the last thing probably we'll be able to do. Please log in. If I have a problem, right, it's going to change this to red and change my text to whatever the problem is, right? Very simple. Let's try this out. Again, we're just practicing, and I'm doing very simple examples so that you see how the code behind file works with the UI on the front end. So the UI is just what we see on the front end. There's controls. They're just objects that we're accessing with properties. They're based off of the control class, and when I drag and drop them onto the form and run the form, those objects become instantiated. That's what happens. So they come to life, right? Otherwise, they're just objects. And right now, as an example, because I have them on the form, I can access them, and I can assume that they're already instantiated, even on the code side, right? Okay, so my behavior that I'm asking for is when I click the login button, all that kind of stuff is good. When I click the login button, it clears and sends us over. But what do I want to do? Talk about when I have a problem, I want to have that message text box.text change to what my problem is. So if this is true, I want to do all this, and I want to print out something like this. I want to say my message text box, or my message label, I think it's message label.text. I call it message label.text is equal to something like, username requires a minimum length of 6 characters. Username, or username too short. How about that? Username too short. Otherwise, it'll be too big for the area, right? Username too short. Okay. Okay. Here's what happens if it doesn't. It passes the test. So I'm back in here. I need to change the background text color of my username, right, of my message text box to red. So I can do something like this. I can go message label dot forecolor, right, my forecolor of my message label. I can make it equal to color dot red, right? So it's red color. Now I have to use color because it's a built-in color to my system. And by the way, this may not work. Just saying. Also, if I leave here, and if it's true, so this is if username text box length is less than 6, but if it's greater than 6, I want to change this text back to what it is. Please log in, and I want to change my color back to black, or to my system default, whatever it is, right? So else, I want to say message label text is equal to please log in, right? And my message label dot forecolor is equal to color. I think is there a default? No, this color is black. I don't know what my default color is. Huh? Would be. What was that? Labels. I mean, you decided that name. That's your name. That's not in 2013. You decided on the name of the you decided on the name of the variable, not me, right? All right, and if that's true, and I know I'm going to do the same thing for the other one, I'm going to kind of copy this one, and I'm going to say else. Here's my else statement. Message text box, please log in, and my for color is true. And I'm also going to put in my else statement. The only one I'm going to go to my enabled is if it's good, if I'm okay. So I'm going to kind of click else. I'm going here and put this in there. And what I want to do is this part here, this username is too short stuff. I'm going to grab this stuff, copy, and put it in here. As you see, there's a lot of duplication going on, right? But instead of username, we can just change this to password too short. By the way, this is a very long way of doing it, and there's other much more elegant ways of doing the same thing. But we're just experimenting. This is the first time we're using forms, and I don't want you guys to be totally scared. So lots of code, lots of duplication, same thing. If I have duplication, again, it requires a method, right? Where I can, or maybe what I can do is the password text box leave event, right? And here's the other thing you can do, because we already have the events, username text box leave event. What if I can have a shared event handler, right? So I can use the same event handler for different event listeners, right? We can do that another day. But that's the other solution. The other solution is use the same event handler, but take a look at what your sender is. Who's your sender? Is it the text box? Is it the username or password text box? And depending on what your sender is, you can check if it's the username text box, take that name of the text box and put it inside the message. If it's the password text box, use that name and put that in the message, right? So there's different ways of doing it, but we'll show you that another day. Let's check this out and see if it works. So here's my username. It's again, my login button is disabled. I want to type in Tom. I press tab. It says, hey, username is too short, right? It comes up. Now if I go in there and change it and I go Thomas and press tab, because please log in, it goes back to normal, right? And if I go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but not the 6, and press tab, your password is too short, right? So I put it in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and press tab. It goes back to please log in, and then click the login button, right? And if I click the login button, it'll take that information and pop it up to the console, pretty much, the debug output window, and we're good to go. All right, so that's a little example that we've done. We've covered a lot already, and some other piece parts from the second PowerPoint as well. But let me just go up to GitHub so you can see those changes. I'm going to go to Team Explorer. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Changes. You can see there's a lot of work involved in making the form as good as you can. And we've only done length. We haven't done what is going in there. We haven't checked to see what you're entering. Like, for example, the person can enter a username like 1235 HQ9, whatever, and that would be the username, right? And we shouldn't allow that. We should only allow a username to start with a character, right? And should a username even have numbers at all, or should it be just letters, right? We can check for that too, right? And there's ways of doing that we'll talk about. So let's add these changes, and I'm going to say updated login form with simple, text box, minimum length, validation. So commit the stage. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to go to sync and push. Okay, so that would sync everything up, and you have the changes. Let's go over this quickly before I leave, and you guys leave too. We've done most of these things. Back color, we assigned the accept button. This is for the actual form itself. Using the toolbox to add a button to a form, we've done that piece just to go over it, and it tells you how to do that. It also talks about the buttons, different kinds of properties for the button, right? Or a control. All controls are very similar. They inherit from the controls superclass, right? So most things you can do in one control, you can do in another, right? You can go down, you can see that there are, in the first one, we did labels and text boxes, and we also did a button, right? So there's enter a number, and we talked about how all controls that are on any user input that comes from a form is string for input. So it's not numbers. Don't even assume if it looks like a number, doesn't mean that it's a number, it's a string. And we have to validate that it's the proper entry. We'll talk about this by calculation next day when we get together, right? When I give you a little lab, you'll have a little bit more choice. We talked about tab index. One thing is we didn't do the string format if I want a format to pump out to the UI. So we haven't done that yet. We did change the fonts of the form. We did all this kind of stuff here. And so you can see, like, we've done most of this We didn't talk about correcting errors yet or anything like that. But at the end of the day, we did delete an unwanted event handling method. We did that one as well. So like I said, we've done most of these things all up until PowerPoint number 1. Now, you might say that's a lot, but truly, in order for us to master forms, you need to know how to navigate the system. You need to know how to drag and drop stuff. And so for you guys, I'm going to say, if you have time, practice. So when we get together next time, we'll do another example. We'll pull a couple other forms. We'll use the same project, and we'll just keep adding more stuff. And this project you can use as a kickoff project for the next lab that you do. Okay? Any questions? Yes.
Use this sort of form application nowadays in practical world.
Yes. Yeah. Stupidly, yes. Right? That's the answer. Yeah. So the question was, do we use applications like this in the real world, a form application? Yes, we do. Right? In fact, you can make a whole bent application with Windows Forms right from scratch. Would I want to do it this way? No. I want to make it so it's cross-platform these days. That's the right way to do it. And so you could use another. Remember, Windows Forms are only for Windows. If I program in Java, they work on Windows, they work on OS X, they work on, it's now Mac OS. Linux, they work everywhere. If I make a web form, now not only is it on the system, but anywhere in the world, right? So you see where I'm going. Nowadays, we use a lot more web-enabled technologies. Back in the day when Windows Forms first started, the web wasn't as pervasive as it is now, right? So it was a different way of making UIs and applications. So that's your answer. Any other questions? Thank you so much. See you Friday. Remember, Friday we have a little lab, and we'll give you to that, and we'll probably do the next week or something. No quiz. Quiz will be the next week because I'm testing on web forms, Windows forms.
JavaScript.